Hi, I'm David Hackoff, Executive Director of NewFest, and I hope you enjoyed that beautiful film you just watched, Minion, directed by Eric Steele. It's one of 120 films that we have showing during the festival, and it's a really special one. And we are really pleased today to be able to be joined by Eric Steele, that film's director, as well as its two leads, Ron Rifkin and Samuel H. Levine. Hi, all.
Hi.
So the audience just got to live in 1980s Brooklyn for a couple hours. Eric, let's start with you. What was you're best known for your documentary work? This is your first narrative feature. What about this story sort of felt like this was the right one to make the shift into narrative storytelling?
I think there's some sort of magical connection to a story that happens with me. I was actually shooting The Bridge way back in 2004 when I went into a bookstore and a bookseller handed me a copy of David Bismogus's book of short stories, in which Minion was one of the stories, and I read it, and I imagine on some level it must have triggered all sorts of sense memories that I had about old men speaking Yiddish and secret languages and like the smell of my grandparents' kitchen and I don't know. And I mean, I'm sure the themes of being a closeted old man and sort of coming up against this sort of wide-eyed, very curious young man must have felt like, I get this.
Mm. So the intergenerational dynamics are a huge part of the film. Ron and Samuel, what was your experience like in shooting? Obviously, you are of two different generations, and so what was that like for you?
Yeah, go Ron.
Well, I was going to say that generation doesn't, I mean, I don't feel like Sam and I are on different generations. I mean, the closeness and the love I feel for him and that I felt with him as soon as I met him, just the separation of generations was gone and was just two actor artists working together. But the fact that I grew up in that world, I grew up in Williamsburg, in the late 30s and 40s. And I lived in a world of people who put on tefillin and wore a prayer shawl and didn't tear toilet paper on the Sabbath. So that world was very familiar to me. And I had seen Sam in this extraordinary play. I went to London to see it with Eric, and I saw it in New York. And I was thrilled to be able to be a part of that world, even for a few weeks, to revisit my own experience of it, and then to share it with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned for the two of you, sort of generation, or differences, sort of went to the side for your characters as well. The fact that that out of necessity in some ways, because of housing needs or because of the need for a 10th man, David and Joseph end up, spending a different kind of time together than perhaps they might have imagined. What was that like for you, Samuel?
Incredible, and a very meta type of thing where David was experiencing that with his grandfather and Sam was experiencing that with Ron, and a great privilege to learn from another generation and to listen to stories about art and acting and religious faith. And yeah.
Me. Talk. Not you. Me.
So yeah, just a great privilege. And I think it's an incredible, we need to listen to our pasts and our past generations to learn how to move forward as well.
And that's obviously been a theme in work you've done over the last few years. I'm wondering, New York audiences certainly know you from your beautiful performance in The Inheritance, and based on the way that Minyan is, when Minyan is set and when The Inheritance is set, in some ways the character that you're playing in Minyan would have been one of the older generation in The Inheritance that might have been affected by AIDS or might have died of AIDS.
Yep.
When were you filming this in relation to your work on The Inheritance?
I filmed it in between the last run in London and the Broadway run. And it was an incredible kind of like continuing of the work, but also a totally different space to enter. But yes, I don't think it's a coincidence. And I think it's something I'm very fascinated by, the kind of reaching back to be in the present to then go forward. Yeah.
And Eric, you know, the fact that the film is set at the beginning of the AIDS crisis, you know, so it is definitely, it's there, it's starting to inform Samuel's character's, you know, exploration. How did you approach that? Because that's, you know, the film isn't set in the throes of it where it's definitely it's there.
I think what was interesting to me, just sort of temporally, as a sort of an idea about time, was that I looked at David Bismogis's story and tried to figure out where I would have been in my own sort of life cycle at that exact moment. And when those two stories came together, it sort of put me right at 1986, 87. And I really did try to connect to that moment of feeling like so many possibilities were about to happen on the one hand, and at the same exact time, so many threats and challenges and dangers. I mean, really mortal level threats and challenges were coming in at the same time. And I think that was I think it's right on that edge, right on that seam between when you could dance and feel freedom, you know, in a club, and then wake up the next morning and wonder if I'm going to live to see, you know, the next year. And I think there's just, I mean, there was something very electric about that moment to me, and I wanted it to be that specific.
Mm. And that line between belonging and danger, you know, it sort of feels like it's thread throughout the film, including the two older men who are living together and are making a life together, but there's also this threat of discovery, and certainly that quest for belonging that David, you know, is seeking throughout the film. And also, does that mean losing his family? What does he have to sacrifice in order to be able to find that place of belonging? I'm wondering if any of you can sort of speak to how that line was thread in the performances or in the making of the film.
Well, I mean, this goes back a little bit to the questions you were asking, Ron and Sam, earlier. I do think that the one really important constant in all of it is this deep love and bond between Joseph and David. It's so much below the level even of language. I think I mean, even looking at the two of you guys now, you know, like on these screens, I can almost, like, it doesn't actually ever seem to me that you weren't, you know, related in that way, that you weren't so tied. And I think it's also the fact that the sort of generation in between, the father was so not in this chain. It really was a sort of heart-to-heart chain between a grandson and a grandfather. And I think that, you know, all these other things, like the exposure of them puts them at risk, you know, like coming out puts you at risk, sort of owning up to who you are. But I think when you put the two of them face to face, it's the discovery that that really could never ever be challenged, that was going to live through it all.
I think for me, and I've thought about this a lot, my guy, did I know that this boy was gay? What's gay? What do I know, me, Isaac? What do I know about gay? It just says in the Bible, you know, you're not supposed to do that. Men are not supposed to do that. Shouldn't. I love this boy so much. I, Ron, love this boy so much. And because I don't have children, whenever I see a young boy who could be my child, you know, the proper age for my child, I always kind of say, I don't think I'd want to be that kid's father. No, definitely not. But then this kid came into my life at that time for that brief period of time, and it was definitely he could be my grandson, without a doubt. So it made life so much easier for me. And then I had to explore the possibility with, maybe I know he's a fakeler. What's a fakeler? What does he do? First of all, it's none of my business what he does, as long as he takes care of himself. So I went through all of those Ron things and then those grandfather things. And we were just lucky to have Eric and to have each other.
Okay.
I want to talk about the sex scene. Because,
Yeah.
it really, you know, I think, you know, it really, in a film that is really so beautifully captures the kind of restraint and the rigidity and the sort of like buttoned upness of the community in which David's grown up. And then that scene really, it doesn't shy away from the carnal liberation of sort of discovery. And for me as a gay man, I think it really actually, it brought me back to my own sort of like seminal experiences, you know, like where it's just like, oh my God, I didn't know I could feel like this, you know, and it went there. It didn't have the sort of like gentle call me by your name pan to the window, you know, to lead to the imagination. What was the thinking, Eric, in terms of how to sort of how to place that scene in the broader context of the film?
I think the whole morning, the sort of waking up in this new world all the way through the sex scene, we shot it pretty much as one take. I mean, I think it's a little bit like Dorothy waking up in Oz and suddenly everything is in color. And I think, you know, a lot of the credit, I mean, obviously goes to Sam and to Alex for just being in it and going into that exact place you're talking about of such freedom and release and sort of magnetic, you know, like just the whole range of it. I think the other part, I mean, obviously, you know, Ula Berkowin, the DP, you know, it was an incredible dance. The original take, I think, is about 17 minutes long, and for a long time in the editing room, we thought we were just going to run the whole take without a cut. And I mean, obviously, we tried to make sort of surgical ones that sort of felt in the moment. But I think it was just so magical in the making. I mean, there was no question that I had absolutely no intention of ever sort of floating out the window or cutting before we sort of understood how liberating and freeing and erotic and joyful and sort of full, you know, David felt in that one moment. I mean, I wanted everyone in the audience to know exactly what that felt like. And you know, Sam and Alex just, they did it. I felt like I didn't direct it so much as I was blessed to, you know, sort of be there for it as a performance. I mean, But the other thing is, I bet there aren't a lot of movies that also have two men reading poetry in it, you know, side by side either, or moments where you actually hear, you know, someone read a you know, like a prayer, you know, at Shabbos in it either. So I think that it is that same sort of documentarian sense of, like, why would you ever turn away from the most authentic, specific part of the story? If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Totally.
You mentioned the director of photography, who I was surprised to find out also shot the film Judy, which has a very different aesthetic and feel to it. And I'm wondering, you know, it's such a specific time and also place, you know, Russian Jewish communities in Brooklyn in a specific time, and how you worked with the DP to be able to sort of capture that milieu.
Well, I think I speak for all of us. We love Ula. I mean, this movie wouldn't be made without him. I mean, he really was a master. And I actually I directed a documentary in Scotland that he shot, where it was really largely he and I and the sound person, you know, traipsing through the forests and the rivers of Scotland, and it was such a beautiful piece of work. This, you know, goes back about 8 years, I think, and so Ula and I already had a relationship, and I felt like we knew how to sort of see at the same time. I mean, I appreciated that he had a very, very sort of rich and organic and very specific vision of things. And I mean, I think we worked with really fantastic costume designer and production designer and everyone with really limited resources. I mean, when people find out how little we spend to make a movie in New York City that looks exactly like 1987 Brighton Beach, it's really a testament to how hard all of these people worked and how much they showed up. And I think, you know, I mean, the locations and the costumes and the camera work, all, I think they're like characters. I think they electrified all of the performances, or certainly infused all of the performances, and everyone felt like they were, you know, touching the clothes that they would have been wearing in 1987, or you know, like sitting on a bed that had the right bedspread or the right wallpaper, or you open a refrigerator and there was, you know, like the food. So
the thing about Ula, I just want to say, is that Ula was staying at Eric's house, and I had gotten a call from my friend Renee that day, and I told her that I'm going to see Ula tonight. So we all kind of spoke to each other, and she said to me while she was shooting Judy that he's very tall and very slender. She called him rubber legs. He could twist his body into the smallest little place, under a chair, under a table, just to get those two bums of those two boys, those two beautiful buttocks, you know, 4 buttocks. Well, I guess it's 4 buttocks. But he could really just twist his body into any position, and you never felt he was there. I mean, he's extraordinary. It's extraordinary and sweet.
Yeah, Ula and Sam deserve medals for their endurance. I mean, Sam is in every scene and pretty much every moment of this movie, and Ula, you know, obviously Ula was there too. I mean, he was a marathoner.
Yeah.
So I think we have time for one more question, and I'm just wondering, from each of you, where do you think David goes from here? What is his life as he continues to move into manhood look like? Let's start with the guy who plays him.
Cool. Yeah. I've actually been thinking a lot about that and trying to learn from David in his ability to engage his identity, both sexually and his religious identity to take action in the world, to to the way he protects and takes action for these two older men and protecting marginalized communities. And I'd like to think that he continues to, you know, come into himself and figure out who he is and fight for other people to have that opportunity too. So I think he's out in the world fighting for sexual liberation and freedom and solidarity, and continuing to read and also have Russian vodka and saying prayers and figuring out who he is. So I have faith for David that he's figuring it out, and I'm trying to learn that from him as well.
It sounds like you, the way you described it.
Yeah, whatever.
How about Ron or Eric? Any thoughts or hopes for what David's?
I forgot to ask Eric. Did David Desmogis see this film?
He has, yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Did he like it?
He did. He liked it. We met the challenge. David Desmogis said, "Make the story. You know, I'll let you adapt this if you promise to make the story your own." And so I think he feels like we did achieve that. I mean, my answer to the question, in a way, is that when I was writing the script, I imagined that in some way David was somehow connected to me, and I think, you know, I'm here. I survived. I did make things. I did struggle. I did, you know, I went left one day and right the next, and you know, with faith, you know, found faith and lost it in the same breath. But I think now I feel like David is something that's shared between a whole lot of people. I mean, partly Sam and this, or largely Sam, and just the sort of you know, energy and life force that he has now at this age, and also, you know, I mean, and the energy and life force that Ron has too. I mean, I think, you know, it takes a lot to keep going all that time, and I don't know, I feel like it's a part of it is that sort of sense of Minyan. It's like, it's not just one person in David anymore. It really is a whole Minyan of sort of life forces in that character, and I think that's sort of how life works in a way. You do carry an inheritance from family. You do carry it from the people that you slept with. You do carry it from the people that you lost, the people that taught you, the people that gave you a ride in a taxi cab and, you know, said two things and changed your life. And I think I love that. I mean, I feel that when I mean, it is that sense of, it's sort of like pride and love and joy every time I see Sam. I'm just so and hopefulness and all the things that I you know, like, I want all these great things to happen, but I'm sure it's going to be a struggle, and I'm sure it's going to be a challenge, and I'm sure there's, you know, things that will not go the way you dream. But I don't know. I could look at these guys every day and be happy for the rest of my life. So
that's so lovely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. It's a really beautiful film, and congratulations on the wonderful work. And we look forward to seeing what he does next.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, everybody.
See you all. Love you.
Love you.
Love you too.
Lots of love there, and thank you so much for joining us for that conversation. Visit newfest.org to see all the other films that we have playing in the festival, and we hope to see you at some of them or some of our virtual events. See y'all soon.